Starting from the study of a personal experience which I live in the first person, but in reflection because the protagonist is my grandfather Enrico, the idea of the experience of analysis was born, embracing several spheres, from the social to the cultural, passing through the central fulcrum of the research, namely the linguistic sphere. It is precisely in the linguistic sphere that Nonno's Enrico's migration to Venezuela from Chocharia is evident, due to the consideration of the birth of mixed languages, Itagnolo, which is a fusion of Italian linguistic elements with the Spanish language spoken in Venezuela. This phenomenon represents not only a linguistic phenomenon, but necessarily refers to the human and physiological level. What remains of Italy to the many migrants who came together in the South of America and create communities to give each other mutual support and backing. Itagnolo shows how the strength of culture is evident in this migratory context, so much so that some Italian terms have now entered Venezuelan culture and the daily life of the community. As a teenager, Grandpa Enrico moved to Venezuela to escape the disaster and critical Italian situation after World War II. In his country, he was forced to spend his days between work in the fields and little time with his family. His experience through personal accounts demonstrated the strong influence of Italian culture and language on the Venezuelan population, which for centuries has been affected by migratory waves coming from all over Europe. Of all the communities that have moved to Venezuela, the Italian one is the most relevant from a cultural and linguistic point of view. This is demonstrated by the many bilingual schools in the territory that my family, including me, has attended, which aim to educate pupils, members of the second and third generation Italian community, according to Italian culture and history. Therefore, the Italian presence in Venezuela is very much felt by the population itself, also because Italians themselves have contributed to the country's development and its wealth. This is known by the history of my grandfather, who after many years of hard work and sacrifice, a long time away from his family who had remained in Italy for the first time, also repaid by the good heart of the Venezuelans, who saw in him a willing young man with the desire to assert himself in society through sacrifice and hard work. The gentleman who owned the workshop where my grandfather took his first step as a worker when he was very young saw from the very beginning his desire to learn the trade, so much so that he let him run the workshop independently. Nonno's story and his personal account also demonstrate a purely linguistic aspect, but one that is strongly connected to Venezuelan culture, which is welcoming and respectfully open to all communities living on the territory. Another aspect that emerged from Nonno's life is also that which refers to the politics of the welcoming country, when authoritarian and despotic figures such as Hugo Chavez appear on the political scene, Italians share the Venezuelan concern for the country's future, voting for the opposition, whichever exponent was running, to block a political movement that could damage Venezuela. Venezuela is a mixed society thanks to a long history of immigration that have allowed different cultures to meet. Currently, about 2/3 of the population is of mestizo origin, mixed European and indigenous ancestry. About 1/5 is European descent, and 1/10 is predominantly African. In the 20th century, Venezuelan indigenous community organized themselves to preserve their traditions and protect their lands, culminating in the creation of the National Indigenous Council of Venezuela. Despite centuries of repression, indigenous culture remains alive, especially in remote areas. The 2011 census recorded 50 indigenous groups, with the Wayu, Warao, and Pemon being the most whispered. Indigenous people were discriminated against, but under Hugo Chavez, their rights were constitutionally recognized, and laws and institutions were established to protect their culture and languages. Venezuela has established intercultural schools and institutes of indigenous languages to preserve the native languages. Grandpa's journey from Italy to Venezuela and his establishment in Venezuela society are an example of a cultural and linguistic movement. that resulted in a positive combination, in a welcoming context, and in a linguistic phenomenon of interests, such as the emergence of mixed languages.